You're recording.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody to the May 27th, 2022 meeting of the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee of the Vermont Climate Council. How's everybody doing?
Great.
Good nods. The nods all around, that's great. Well, it's been a while since we have met, and it's so wonderful to see all of your faces. It's also wonderful that we have several new faces joining the subcommittee. And so I'm going to go through the agenda and then we will roll right into our meeting. We will start with an approval of the agenda and the March 25th meeting minutes. Then we thought we would go through, spend a bit more time on introductions today because we have some new members, and we'll ask first our new members to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about themselves, as well as why they were interested in joining the Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee. We will also ask the current members and support staff, state support staff, to introduce themselves and really touch on the importance of your individual feelings on the importance of this work in the RRI subcommittee. Then we're going to go through a few task group updates with the Municipal Vulnerability Index task group, Climate Toolkit task group, as well as any other updates that are relevant. Jane is going to give us a full update on what the council's been doing and what the work plan is for the fall. We will have public comment and then adjourn after that. Are there any additions to the agenda that folks would like to see? Okay, and are there any concerns about the meeting minutes that are posted in the agenda? Okay, we don't usually pass a motion to accept the minutes, but seeing no issues with those minutes, we can move on. So that brings us to the central part of our meeting and meeting our some of our new members and staff support. So I'd like to start off. I'd like to just introduce myself as one of the co-chairs. And then we'll roll into the rest of the intros. I'm Erica Borneman. I'm the director of Vermont Emergency Management. We are intimately involved in climate adaptation work in an interest of breaking the cycle of disaster and hopefully working ourselves out of a job. But unfortunately, there's just new threats and hazards that need attention. So I don't think that's going to be possible. But we do our best to mitigate especially flooding risks, as well as other natural hazard impacts through the hazard mitigation program. And I've been the co-chair since the beginning of the Climate Council's work. I'm also the DPS, Department of Public Safety's appointee to the Vermont Climate Council. So with that, I'd like to go, I see Megan Rausch, and please let me know if I pronounce that correctly, Megan. She's right next to me. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to join our lovely band?
Yeah, sure. And you did pronounce it right. My name is Megan Rausch. I use she, her pronouns, and I've been working in affordable housing in Vermont for about 8 years now. I started working at USDA Rural Development as a rural housing specialist and then a public affairs specialist. And I currently, for the past about 3 years, have worked as a community development underwriter for Vermont Housing Finance Agency. I also am the vice chair of the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition's Manufactured Housing Subcommittee, mouthful. And I've done a lot of advocacy and research around manufactured housing and some of the infrastructure issues that they face within our state. And let's see, I'm also a grad student at UVM right now. I'm getting my Master's of Science in Community Development and Applied Economics, and also a certificate in Community Resilience and Planning. And so a lot of my research has focused on resilience planning and disaster risk perceptions, along with COVID and access to green spaces and mental health. So that's kind of where my interests lie, and that's what got me interested in joining the subcommittee. I also have some experience as a volunteer firefighter and EMT, so I've seen some of the disaster flooding stuff that has happened in the state, and yeah, so that's kind of a summary.
Thanks, Megan. So great to have you here and great to meet you. Why don't we go to Miriam Sirota-Winston?
Hey, I'm Miriam. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a student in Montpelier and I'm an activist at the Vermont Youth Lobby. And I'm here to be an advocate for Vermont's youth and help in whatever way I can. Is there anything else I should add, Erica?
No, Miriam, we might ask you what you like to do in your free time, because it sounds like being a full-time student and part of the youth lobby takes up a lot of your time. So, so what is it that you do when you have a free minute?
I'm an athlete and I love to sing. That's some of what I do in my free time.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for joining us. Why don't we go to Val Story?
Hi, everyone. I'm Val. I hope you can hear me okay. I'm working on limited bandwidth for the next month, but excuse me, I have been working on renewable energy policy for over a decade. I am now working at the Great Plains Institute, which is based in the Midwest, switched to working from mostly with state energy offices and now working mostly with municipalities, which is close to my heart. I do a lot of volunteer work with my community of Underhill, sitting on their planning commission and other subcommittees, and I am drawn to working on this particular subcommittee because I am looking to accelerate how Vermont municipalities can begin engaging in reducing their energy load and preparing for climate change and being more resilient in general. I, similar to Megan, just finished up a certificate on clean energy finance, focusing on wholesale markets and more broadly clean energy finance. If that's of any use to this committee, would love to put those new skills to use, but in general, just have focused on and worked on renewable energy, clean energy policy with state agencies for the last 10+ years. Excited to be here.
Thank you, Val. And Alice Peel.
Hi, I'm Alice Peel. I live in Waitsfield and I'm now the chairperson of the Waitsfield Planning Commission. And one of the things the Waitsfield Planning Commission is doing is we are right at the center of a lot of tension in Waitsfield and the Valley regarding quick development of affordable housing versus really understanding planned development and protection of our natural resources, which is a very huge, I believe, climate action and climate change focus that we need to do. I sort of kind of stumbled into this committee, and I'd say that I think Jens Hilke has kind of been he's kind of been the constant in how I keep stumbling into things. But my interest has always been in some good wetland restoration in Waitsfield and the Valley. And also the Waitsfield Planning Commission and the Waitsfield Water Commission has now got a fully funded study from the Department of Environmental Conservation, and I'm chairing the small committee that's running an infrastructure study project on wastewater solutions and extending our water services to promote smart growth in our defined area. So this to me is just a natural addition to this, because I feel water planning and clean air they all go hand in hand to really look at what we want the Valley and Vermont to be for the future.
Thanks so much, Val. We're very happy to have you with us. And I don't know if Jared Omer was able to join. He is another member. I don't see his name on here. So Jared Omer will also be joining us. He heads up the from the Department of Health, and now I'm going to get this wrong. He does quite a bit of work on the climate impacts on public health, and we all of us work closely with him in a lot of different capacities as we move forward with the climate toolkit. Especially a lot of his resources are going to be brought to bear on that. So we look forward to seeing him joining us. With that, I'd love to go through a reintroduction of our current members, and I'm going to start at the top of the window here with Jens.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jens Hilke. I'm a conservation biologist with Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. I do municipal technical assistance, so I help towns and work with awesome volunteers like Alice and Val, the planning commissions, conservation commissions on their conservation planning. And so the work of this Rural Resilience and Adaptation Subcommittee has really dovetailed quite a bit with what I do for my day job. I also work a lot with other organizations and sister agencies like Andrea at VTrans. So good to be with you all. Thanks.
Thanks, Jens. And Jane.
Afternoon, everybody. Sorry, I'm getting over COVID, which I do feel like has hit everybody so much. I feel like myself again today, which feels really nice. And I live in Waitsfield. It's so nice to know that, Alice, you're on the Planning Commission. My husband is on the Water Commission, so you must work with him a bit. So Jane Lazorchak, I'm the director of the Global Warming Solutions Act. I work within the central office of the Agency of Natural Resources. I've helped over the last, it's been 18 months, which blows my mind already, in standing up the Climate Council and the Climate Action Plan, and now have the greatest privilege, it feels like, to transition and working to stand up the Climate Office in the Agency of Natural Resources. And I'll be shifting into directing the office, and we'll have a whole whopping staff of 8. Rather than just Marion and I, there'll be 8 of us in the Climate Office, and we're planning for that transition to start in July. So really excited about that. And Marion isn't here today, but I can sort of start to speak on her behalf and share with you all that we've been anticipating and hoping for something like this, the Climate Office, to unfold out of the climate plan process, and have been positioning Marion, because of her experience working with Erica, working with all of you, that she'll be transitioning from being the GWSA coordinator to being the Resilience and Adaptation Program coordinator for the Climate Office. So she'll be really focused on this work with all of you. And we're thinking about how to sort out the administrative work of the Climate Council and subcommittees as we go forward. But Marion's really great. She'll continue to really support this subcommittee and the work of it. So looking forward to working with all of you. And I just feel like there's like this all-star lineup now of folks on this subcommittee with all the new additions. So it's really exciting as we pivot to thinking about implementation, and even thinking about the further work that we need to do to advance, to further advance the actions and recommendations in the plan around resilience and adaptation. So thanks everyone for being here.
Thanks, Jane. That's super exciting news about Marion. So great work there. Ann Lawless.
You. It's so good to see everybody. It's been a long time, and welcome new people. I live in the town of Wheelock, which is it's a small town in Caledonia County. I retired in 2018. I was the director of the American Precision Museum in Windsor, and the impact of Irene on that site had a lasting impact on me. So when I retired, I did a lot of gardening, and then I was like, oh, I gotta do some more. So I was elected to serve on my select board in the town of Wheelock. It's a very small town, 750 people. I feel like, you know, in a way that's my voice, because we just we have to do everything that all the other towns have to do, but we have a lot less capacity than many of the other towns. And I also, as a result of having a home energy audit at my own home, I began as the outreach coordinator for the Heat Squad program. And Heat Squad is based at NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, which is an affordable housing agency in West Rutland. And I don't think I ever said this before, but I think it's really a commitment of my organization. They're paying for half of my time participating on this council, and I think that's really significant about the organization, and I'm, you know, obviously I'm grateful. Thank you.
Great, Ann. Thank you. Jay Schaefer. I should say Dr. Schaefer.
Thanks. No, Jay is perfectly fine. Yeah, so I wear a lot of hats here. I live in the Kingdom, and I'm actually in the midst of a significant career change, but my mojo has always been extreme weather and weather. My training is atmospheric science. I taught for 17 years at Northern Vermont University, the art and science of weather forecasting. And along the way, I got a little impatient. I started a business, Northview Weather, about 4 years ago, and was able to patent and commercialize power outage prediction technology that helps people like Mike Burke prepare for storms, so we could all watch Netflix faster after the storm, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So, but you know, I got a little tired at the college there teaching just to undergraduates. I need a little more stimulation, and my business is now being acquired, and I am now the Chief Science Officer working remotely for Disaster Tech Incorporated, which is going to be specializing in software for emergency preparedness. Looks like our biggest traction points now are federal state organizations. So we have some great projects ongoing, and don't worry, Mike, we're not going to leave our founders, Vermont founders, behind either. So was also involved with helping to write the climate action plan with the weather climate piece with Leslie Ann. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Mike Burke.
Hi, everyone. So I am Mike Burke. I work with the field operations team at Green Mountain Power. And just to give some context to that, it's everyone from the people that control the electrical grid in the control room to the line workers that put the lines back up. And where I get involved a lot with people here is also our designers, electrical designers that do a lot of the resiliency projects that we're doing to deal with climate change. I've been at GMP for 25 years, so I've literally seen it get worse every single year. A lot of the times I'm on the phone with Erica at about 2 in the morning as we respond to emergencies and working together with the state to do that. So that's how I ended up here, thinking of what others have said on how they ended up here. But that's how I ended up here, because we seem to deal with climate change almost every week now. Happy to be here, happy to work toward making Vermont more resilient. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Joe Segali.
Hi, everyone. Joe Segali. I'm the Director of Policy Planning and Research at the Vermont Agency of Transportation. And this is actually my last meeting because I'm retiring at the end of June. So I guess I'm having a career change too, in a sense. And but I've been, you know, I started the agency just a little over 10 years ago, and it was just after Irene that I came on board. and hadn't really, I'm a transportation planner and engineer, and hadn't really thought about the concept of resilience at all until I came to the agency. And when I was there, everyone was really in the throes of the recovery and was super busy. And I started thinking about, like, how can we sort of be better prepared for the next time? Because no one's really thinking about that right now. They're just kind of like, how do we get out of where we are? And I think there's just this tendency too, with we all come together in emergencies because it's just what we have to do. But once things settle down, we just forget about it and kind of get back to our normal lives. And I think resilience in a lot of ways is about not doing that. It's about being proactive and putting, improvements and systems in place just so that we can withstand impacts later on. And so I've been doing that kind of work for the agency for the last 10 plus years. But I'm, ready to go, ready to hand it off. And Andrea Wright is here. And is she still on the phone?
She's here.
There you are, Andrea.
I was eating lunch, so I shut my video off.
And, Andrea became our environmental policy manager in January, replacing Dan Dutcher, who some of you may have worked with. And we've added some other capacity in the environmental side. And Andrea is going to be able to kind of get into resilience. And you might remember Gina Campoli, who used to have the position, and she was all into resilience, and I kind of worked along with her. And so Andrea is going to be taking over from me on this committee. And so she's a new member, and maybe she can introduce herself now, if you don't mind, Erica.
Yeah,
say
of
hello
course.
to everybody.
Yeah, hi, as Joe said, I'm Andrea Wright and the environmental policy manager at VTrans. I've been with VTrans for about 22 years, all those years in an environmental capacity, more related to project and construction, design, implementation, and now getting into the policy side of things. So all things environmental policy, but and new to climate and energy. So I'm excited, serving on the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee and for the transportation task group, and happy to be a part of this group as well. Jane, is there a formal process that we need to go through for that? Yeah, okay. So it's not as easy as just saying Joe's gone and is in.
I can't decide. I thought I could just decide. Why isn't it like that?
Somewhat easier. I think you can. I like that, Joe. I felt confidence in the email you sent.
Yeah. I don't think it'll be a problem at all. I think, I understand it's really secretary designee, but I'm totally confident that the secretary will want Andrea to be here.
Yes, exactly.
Great.
Well, thank you
wait for that
both.
process.
I'm sad because, like, it seems like all of my favorites are retiring right now. But for the end of June, their deputy director is also retiring at the end of June. So
Right.
Come on, Joe.
Yeah, I'll probably just do this kind of stuff for free after. Like so many of you that have actually been participating in this whole process. Vermont runs on volunteers. I'm involved with my town too, and and there's many of you that I think even are on this committee that are just here because you care about Vermont and you're putting in the time and the effort. So thanks for doing that.
Thank you, Joe. Bronwyn.
Hi all, my name is Bronwyn Cook. I am a community planning and policy manager in the Community Planning and Revitalization Division, which is in ACCD. I am a relatively new transplant to Vermont and to the state. Prior to this position, I was working for the city of Cambridge, Massachusetts for about 10 years as a quote unquote sustainability planner, which just meant that I sort of got wrapped into anything that anybody might consider sustainable. But primarily I focused on the city's climate and energy goals and plans, and dabbled a little bit in their resiliency work as well. So the division that I'm in now, where most of the work we do is around investments and working with the regional planning commissions and municipalities on programs and investments that support and advance the state's smart growth goals and land use goals. And so I'm participating in the climate action plan. I'm here on behalf of Chris Cochran, who is the official, I think, representative, but I show up and I'm try and be supportive and have been very much enjoying working on climate at the state level. So.
Thanks, Bronwyn. Anne.
Hi, I'm Anne Margolis. I'm the Deputy Planning Director at the Department of Public Service, which is the ratepayer advocate for the state in citing cases before the Public Utility Commission of Utility and Other Energy Infrastructure. And we're also the State Energy Office. We recently put out the Comprehensive Energy Plan sort of at the same time as the Climate Action Plan, and the two really speak to each other and lean in quite a bit on the concept of resilience and what it means in the energy space, which is a personal interest of mine. And like you and everyone here on the call, it seems I've worn a lot of hats in my local government in my town of Corinth, which 1,500 person town in just southeast of Montpelier, about 45 minutes southeast, and currently serving on the Planning Commission of Corinth, as well as alternate on the Act 250 District 3 Commission. So have a little bit of the land use piece, you know, thinking about those two things quite a bit synergistically these days. So appreciate all the new folks joining us, and yes, sad to see Joe go. It's been great working closely with him on putting together our part of the climate action plan. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm the State Hazard Mitigation Officer at Vermont Emergency Management. So on Erica's team and Ben's team when he gets to introduce himself. I see my job as supporting the resilience of Vermont communities. So predominantly managing funding from FEMA and now the American Rescue Plan Act as well. And the majority of what we're doing is flood mitigation work. Occasionally we get to do a couple other things too, but that's me.
Thanks, Stephanie. Ben.
Hello, everybody. So Ben Rose, I am the Recovery and Mitigation Section Chief, one of Erica's section chiefs at Vermont Emergency Management. I fell into FEMA world with the Irene Recovery Office shortly after Irene, and have been working in disaster recovery ever since, and for COVID for the last 27 years, it seems. The first third of my career was in solid waste management, recycling, composting, hazardous waste, medical waste, plastic recycling, landfill siting. Then I took a brief hiatus to serve 2 terms in the Vermont House of Representatives, representing my community of Williston, and was the House Natural Resources and Energy Committee clerk, which was educational. And then the middle third of my career was as executive director of the Green Mountain Club, taking care of Vermont's hiking trails and watching amazing, strong young people like Val Story do amazing things in the mountains. So that was wonderful. Then I was, so then FEMA, this thing, and disaster recovery, and trying to keep up with climate change. And we've had, since Irene, I don't know, 15 disasters, mostly floods, a few ice storms. We're pretty good at it now after Irene, and that has come in handy for COVID-19 response. I'm coming up on $1 billion of federal grant administration. Wow. So that's me.
There's so much I can say about the number of disasters since Irene, but sometimes I have to count them, and it's hard to keep track of one to another, because especially the flooding ones look very similar every time. David Grass, thank you so much for joining us. I had introduced Jared, and I didn't introduce you, but David is also a new member of the subcommittee to help with the task groups. I'm not sure, David, are you on the Municipal Vulnerability Index task group or the Climate Toolkit task group?
Municipal Vulnerability Index.
Thank you. I know that you two are splitting the difference, and I just couldn't keep track of which was doing what. So please go ahead and tell us about yourself.
Sure. David Grass, from Vermont originally, live in Shelburne now, grew up in West Bolton and South Burlington, went to Middlebury College with Val, worked for the Green Mountain Club while I was at Middlebury College, hiked the Long Trail a few years back with my 12-year-old son, which I think is the most rewarding thing I've ever done, and would recommend it to anyone. Professionally, I've worked for the state for the last 10 years. Before that, I worked for New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. In both places, we had a grant from the CDC to do climate and health work, quantifying health impacts of climate change, planning to try to minimize those health impacts. Our focus lately has been on trying to see those places where there's overlap between mitigation efforts and the health benefits from weatherization projects, from active transportation, to try to, externalize what are those health benefits. And so when we're doing policy evaluations about, where can we move forward, that people are really getting the full picture of how things that are good for things that are good for the climate are frequently very good for public health. For about 2 years, I worked on the COVID response, and that overlapped with a period of time when the health department, I think, normally would have been involved with climate action plan and the comprehensive energy plan. So we really were not at the table then, and we're really glad to have the opportunity to be at the table now. So thanks for having us, and I hope that we can be a resource.
Thank you, David. And Sue Charbonneau.
Good afternoon. Sue Charbonneau. I am the administrative assistant to the director of Vermont Emergency Management. I've been here for 5 years. Love every minute of it, and I'll be taking minutes for our meetings.
Thank you, Sue. And I see we have Ellen Holmes and Mason Overstreet, and I'm not sure if, are you folks members of the public joining us today?
Yes, I am a member of the public, and I'm sorry, my camera is having issues turning on. I'm happy to quickly introduce myself. I'm Mason Overstreet. I'm a staff attorney with Conservation Law Foundation. I work on clean air and water issues, but I also work on climate resilience issues here in Vermont and region-wide. And I'm really excited about this subcommittee's work, and excited to see if there's any way that I can help as you kind of move forward. And grateful for all of your work and participation. So thank you so much. And I'm sorry about the camera. It's weird. I moved out of the office and into the kitchen to have lunch.
That's okay. We'll catch you some other time. Ellen.
Yeah, I'm a member of the public. I'm also a member of the Putney Conservation Commission here in Putney, Vermont, and obviously have an interest in this topic and the work that you're all doing. And I'm really just here to listen and learn. And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us and taking the time today.
Thank you.
Did I miss anybody? I don't think so. Okay, well, thank you very much. Those are great intros, and yeah, like Jane said, we have such an all-star cast here. So, with that, we'll move into task group updates. Give folks an update on all the work that's been going on. Of course, as a reminder, we are really focusing our subcommittee efforts on the charge in the Global Warming Solutions Act to develop a municipal vulnerability index that will assist not only at the state level, but at the local level with identifying areas of climate vulnerability so that we can target and direct initiatives as well as funding to plug those gaps. We also have a charge to develop a climate toolkit that can be a reference toolkit for primarily municipalities, but I think it's a little bit broader than that. And I don't want to dice up those definitions too much before the task group members are able to give us some updates. So with that, why don't we start with the Municipal Vulnerability Index? And can you just raise your hands real quick if you are on the Municipal Vulnerability Index task force? Anne, David, Joe Sagali, Jay Schaefer. Okay. And Stephanie Smith. Well, thank you. Would any of you folks like to just kind of give an update on where we're at with that task group and some of your recent activity?
They're probably thinking there's been no activity with the group.
Right. I was just thinking like, yeah, I was like just jogging my memory, and I was going to go over to you, Jane, because I know that there's some RFP and work that's been going on. So Jane, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so I really thank everybody for their patience. I can't tell you just anything with digital service components and working through IT. It's just been a real challenge within state government lately. I'm saying this in a public recorded meeting. I should probably walk it back, but
it's not a surprise, Jane. It's anywhere in government. Yeah. It's a challenge. Yeah. So
this one, I think it's been a challenge for me, and we have 3 different contracts vetting through right now with ADS. And I think what's been hard within our own agency is there aren't clear processes on how and when to engage with ADS. And so then it just becomes this wall that you hit to redo, revamp, and figure out the process. So it stalled for quite some time with ADS, and then, but we have it back. It was posted last Friday. I just dropped in the chat the RFP. I believe I shared it with the whole task group, but apologize, I don't think I actually did send the RFP to the whole subcommittee. So it's attached in that link. If you want to share it with consultants who you think would be good for this kind of work, I would appreciate that. Or if you have recommendations, please direct that to me, and I will share it with the consultants who might benefit from seeing it. Some certain counselors who have experience in this area have sent on specific consultants, and I have targeted outreach to 3 or 4 consultants who we thought could and would do a great job at this work. And so to be clear, it's open for quite some time, and that's just due to vacation schedule, and also knowing that our business office, I'm sort of pushing to get more RFPs posted in the next few days, but our business office is essentially shut down for the month of June and July. We cannot enter into any new contracts until August. For folks who work in our agency, there'll be an email going out from our secretary that's like agency-wide, there's no new grants or contracts until mid-August now, it sounds like. And so it is going to be slow to get under contract, but I think that's okay because that we'll get some good proposals, and the process has and will continue to be as a task group for me to share all of those proposals with the task group. I'll put together a review and ranking form the way I've done with other RFPs that we've collaborated on with subcommittees or council members on. We'll work as a group to review and rank them, and then select a contractor. And that's where the real work will then engage with all of you. The management of this contract, the deliberations will be vetted through the task group and ultimately the subcommittee. And it's a year-long project. So looking forward and how it's going to relate and work with the EJ mapping tool, which the governor hasn't signed the bill yet, but we are anticipating within our agency that bill is going to be signed and moved into law. So we've been starting to plan for that within the Agency of Natural Resources, and that tool also will have overlap, and we're really excited that, David, you're part of this too, knowing that the Department of Health manages the tool, emergency management, but there's a lot of resources to put together here. So sorry for the delay, but excited it's up and running. Ben, go ahead.
Thank you. So maybe we'll get into this when we talk about the climate toolkit work, but I would appreciate having just a few sentences of conversation about the so what of the vulnerability index. I mean, assuming that we come up with a very sensitive and accurate measure of which communities have the greatest vulnerability under which criteria, who is going to do what with that? And how does it tie to the climate toolkit?
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. I can tell you from my vantage a couple outcomes, and I'm sure many of you who work in this area can think of others, but I would expect and think that the council could direct and think about how we direct resources and recommendations deliberately pointed at those communities. I also have been thinking, and know Marion and all of you have been thinking about how it interplays and how it can be a gateway to actually have communities visually see their vulnerabilities and then help the toolkit direct them to the resources that best match the capacity needed in those communities. And so I think there's an applicability with respect to the toolkit as the way that people interface with data and information. And so I'm hopeful that beyond that, RPCs, state employees that will be thinking about how we prioritize resources and direct technical assistance and capacity to those communities that need it most based on this map. But I think that's a great question for us to really be thinking about the different layers of access points into this, what this information tells us and how we use it and formulate recommendations based on that.
Joe?
Yeah, I was just trying to look through the RFP really quickly. I saw it a while ago and provided some comments, but I think somewhere in there, it's part of the process should be defining what its purpose is, because that shouldn't come after it's developed. That should come before it's developed, right? Because otherwise, it needs to be developed for a reason. So I kind of, and I think there was some outreach as part of it as well to sort of kind of set that all up, because the GWSA just wasn't specific about what its purpose was. It was just developed this thing. So
there's and I have to pull it up. The GWSA is pretty, I think, pretty clear regarding what the MBI is meant to be used for. And so if I can find that, I mean, it is and it isn't. I think it is clear about what baseline is meant to be used for, but I think there's I think there's a lot of other applications that the MBI could potentially be used for that we just haven't really thought through yet. So it will be good for the task group to be engaging with our contract support as well as engaging with this subcommittee to more fully develop how we want it to be tailored so that it can best be applied in service of identifying what is vulnerability and what that means for towns in Vermont and how they can address it. Any other questions on the update on the Municipal Vulnerability Index? Okay, and I usually go to Marion for the Climate Toolkit update. Jane, I don't know if you have that, but first, can folks also raise their hands if they're involved on the Climate Toolkit Task Force? So we can acknowledge you as well, Jens, Anne. Now, I know that task force is also a multi-committee task force, and Ben is involved. Thanks, Ben. Jane, do you have an update based on, I can pull up the most recent update from Marion, but you may have.
I think Marion was hoping, I'm happy to do it, but this is a really active task group, and I imagine any of the folks on it could also provide an update, but happy to do it, but happy to defer to others too.
Go ahead, Jens.
Yeah, so we actually did just meet with a consultant about the look and feel of the website, and it got us thinking a lot about the information architecture of the types of tools that we have and what sort of buckets we want to put those tools in, because we're really committed to this tool having multiple avenues to get into this tool for different way, different life experiences, different way people think and talk and categorize information. So we want to present it several different ways, and it's been very interesting to to think about how we make that as accessible as we can for a variety of potential consumers. Anne or Ben, did you have other things to add?
There's a lot to do to build the website that we envision.
Yeah, we have some great people who joined the committee fairly recently who are from frontline communities. And as well, we have Dr. Leslie Dupigny-Giroux. It's wonderful to have her because she's a teacher among her other capacities. So, I mean, this is really hard because some of the audience members, some of the targeted people that we're trying to reach have digital literacy issues, and people will be coming from both very large, well-capacitated municipalities as well as teeny ones. So we're putting some emphasis on how do people find the right place to land in whatever structure it is that we create, so that they can find useful information that's useful to them where they are in the process. I guess that's it.
Thank you all. Are there any other relevant updates at the task group level that folks would like to touch on? Okay, Jane, I'm going to hand it back over to you to give us an update on what the council's been up to.
Great. So previously, up in the top of the chat, there's the agenda, and linked in the agenda, Marion did post the update that was provided to the council last week, when I think the council met last week, yeah, last Monday. And so that's in there for some details around funding and allocation of the budget and bills. I also want to say thank you to Bronwyn. Marion passed on the tracking sheet that you've been using. And I also have from Michelle Boomhauer and AOT, from Andrea, a Tech Transportation Task Group, a very detailed component of the Agency of Transportation's outcomes from this session. And so the 2 slides up in the link that Marion shared with all of you, I'm going to make a more comprehensive update of all funding and legislation that came out of this session that touch on climate in a broad way. And I say that to start with all of you, largely because many of the policies and strategies and recommendations that this subcommittee is thinking about have broader reach and impact around funding that goes to water quality or municipal infrastructure around wastewater. And that's not shown on those slides because it's really what was bucketed as directly as climate. And so I'll be looking to update that in a comprehensive way, including the work from ACCD and AOT, and then working with other state colleagues to ensure it's comprehensive, and we'll share it with all of you as that finishes up for reference. Ben, go ahead, I'll pause there.
Yeah, Jane, I was just looking at the report that was included and the status of key legislation with ties to the cap on page 2, and I don't see H318. And H318 was the fuel switching Representative Sebelia's bill that really became the vehicle for the governor's Resilient Community Centers project, which I think has real benefit potentially for rural communities. So maybe that should be added.
Okay. Yeah. Julie and I just put this together like the night before the council meeting. So we'll be working on making it more comprehensive for everyone. But in light of all of that, this is really ahead of that work is intended to tee up work for the council this fall. And what I wanted to say there is that the council did meet last week and now is on a hiatus until September, which is a long break for the council. It'll be off for 4 months, but there'll be comprehensive work to tee up for the council this coming fall. One component being a preparation and further prioritization of recommendations in the CAP for the new biennium, starting with the legislative session for next year. And the steering committee of the Climate Council will meet this summer in order to think through a process of doing that with the council. The council historically hasn't done a great job of prioritizing, I will say. It's sort of always been everything's a priority approach within the climate action plan. And I think in order to advance thoughtful components that are really timely, we're going to try to push the council a bit to look forward to advancing a suite or a package with for the legislative session next year. So the council will come back in the fall to convene around prioritization. There are also 2 task groups that are thinking about substantive components or addendums to the climate action plan. The transportation task group, which we alluded to earlier, for new members and others, the largest recommendation within the climate action plan to reduce emissions in the transportation sector, as well as generate revenue to further invest in other components of transportation sector. The TCI program fell apart the week before we signed the climate action plan with Massachusetts and Connecticut. That was a regional approach to transportation sector pulling out. And so there's a task group that has a timeline of this fall to further advance recommendations in the transportation space for the council to consider. We're also thinking about that sort of holistically now with the clean heat standard not having passed this session. That could be just an opportunity to sort of break down sectoral walls and think about a whole approach to regulating emissions from fuel dealers. So the transportation sector will come back up this fall. That will definitely be a lot of discussion and debate with the council about what the best approach is in the transportation realm. There's also a substantive task group working on biomass. There were a whole suite of actions related to biomass, both electricity generation and thermal applications that were tabled from the climate action plan at the end of the process, largely because they didn't reach consensus within the subcommittee where they were generated, Ag and Eco, and they were never vetted with the cross-sector mitigation subcommittee. So there's a cross-subcommittee task group also comprised of science and data folks thinking about biomass recommendations right now, as well as the sort of a position and policy around biomass as a carbon solution, as a climate solution, I should say. And so that task group is fraught with challenges, I would say, around scope creep, around, there's also other groups looking at life cycle analysis, which also has significant play with biomass. And then the clean heat standard failing, challenges us with thermal application of wood too, or maybe I should say opens a door for us to think about wood in a different way. So those are the main substantive components for the council, really thinking about addendums to the climate action plan this fall, as well as further recommendations coming from the existing plan to push with the legislature this session. So there'll be a bunch of work this summer with the steering committee of the Climate Council to tee up process and discussion for that this fall, but the council itself will pause and sort of wait for analyses and work at the task group level and subcommittee level to come up. So that's the bulk of what's happening with the council. I can't think of, there'll be a big transition of the council this fall. 8 appointees of the council are House appointees. All of those are up for reappointment. Those are only 2-year appointments to the council, and they're due to step down in October. So we're working with the committee on committees to think about that perhaps ahead of the fall, so that it's not either reappointments are made or new people can be brought into the process before this substantive work begins. So I'll pause there and see if there's any questions.
Jane, being unfamiliar with the process, it seems like if you have to wait for a law to get passed to take action, that creates a significant obstacle to moving forward on certain things. Are there a suite of climate action plan strategies that the state within the executive agencies is moving forward on outside of those things that require legislative action?
Yes. And this is many of the approach in the emissions cutting section of the plan are incentive based and or need legislative action, to be honest. There are programmatic shifts, planning, other things that are moving forward. But in the emissions regulation space, it was a very pro legislation plan, I would say. If folks don't know about the Global Warming Solutions Act, there is a large focus that if the Climate Action Plan took a regulatory approach, ANR, the Agency of Natural Resources, would be obligated to go to rulemaking based on what the Climate Action Plan tells us to do. But the plan only put forward a handful of rules. Those are associated with electric vehicles, and those are moving forward now. But the rest of the plan was very much needs legislation to act and or programmatic shifts, which we are doing. That is not the same for resilience and adaptation and sequestration, both in the natural and working lands as well as in the built environment. And I know that Marion has pushed and is interested in really looking, and I should say in the climate office, we'll also have a focused person on natural and working lands resilience and adaptation. So Marion will be focused more on communities and the overlap there with natural and working lands, but we're also going to hire a natural and working lands program person. I keep calling him program person because I'm not sure if their title will be program manager or coordinator yet, but that person will also, I think both those opportunities will be to look at the climate action plan, further review strategies and recommendations, think about how we put those in play across state government. And the climate office will have an interagency coordination advisory board. And so there'll be a space for us to be thinking about how we can advance this work without legislation, and then use these subcommittees to further prioritize, further refine, I should also say, recommendations in the plan that didn't have enough detail, perhaps. Yeah.
Great, thanks for the detail.
You're muted.
I think that's it for me. Oh, Anne.
Thanks. Just also, I mean, to the extent it relates to this committee, the department is going to be starting a number of conversations with folks, a bunch of stakeholder work around increasing the target for renewability or carbon freeness of our electric supply to 100%, which is a recommendation in the Climate Action Plan and also the Comprehensive Energy Plan. That would require a statutory change, but we hope to do a lot of the legwork to work with stakeholders to develop a package of what that looks like to present to the legislature at some point. So hopefully we'll be able to send that, some information on that out through folks. And in the, and that's not to say that that work even is needs to happen before, a bunch of our electric utilities are already moving in that direction on their own as part of their own planning work. The other piece, if folks look at the slides that are linked in the agenda today, the CAP slides, that slide on all of the ARPA money that's coming, all the federal money, and there's a bunch of also infrastructure federal money coming in that's all going to be pouring into the state to go towards supporting electrification of heating and transportation, to go toward things like resilience, upstream and downstream grid resilience, the energy resilience side of things. So I just wanted to mention that there's going to be a lot of work happening to make measures and implementation happen that's not going to wait for legislation.
I also see that Catherine just joined us. Catherine is the co-chair of this subcommittee. Catherine, do you want to introduce yourself for just a minute, and as well as how you got here?
So hi, I'm Catherine Dimitrick, the co-chair, as Erica noted. In the rest of my world, I'm the Executive Director of Northwest Regional Planning Commission, and I apologize for my absence. I'm home with 3 sick kids, so time escaped me. But now I'm here, at least to say hello.
Thanks, Catherine. Are there any other questions related to updates on the Climate Council or general questions? Okay.
Your hand up. Is that a legacy hand, Bronwyn?
Thanks.
Maybe not fair because it's not really a question, more of a comment. I just wanted to say that I was really glad to hear that Marion's going to be moving into a position that's supporting the Rural Resilience Subcommittee. And I do think taking a look at the items that landed in the Climate Action Plan and just doing a quick assessment of what's had some movement in this legislative session is going to be really helpful for us to be strategic in creating a work plan that we can sort of advocate up to the Climate Council. I think, we all know that the process was incredibly condensed and there's a lot to cover in the resiliency realm. And so I think we did a really great job of sort of putting a bunch of stuff out there. And I think it would be helpful to now take some time, take a step back, look at what happened in this legislative session, and come up with a work plan. I think part of that I'd be really interested in seeing is, I think we saw with the emissions reduction side is that, there's a really clear number to put behind mitigation. It's carbon emissions reductions. And that's something you can really hang your hat on in terms of evaluating implementation. I think for resiliency, there's a little bit of work to do to come up with what is that? What's the metric? Probably not one. What are the metrics that we're looking at for resilience to help us prioritize and strategically come up with a work plan that really, kind of allows us to make some good progress. So I just want to say I'm glad that Marion's going to be stepping in there, and I do hope we can take some time to look at the action plan items that we put together and start digging into some more strategic planning of how we advance those and how we prioritize those.
Jane?
I was just going to follow up on that and just say, you may remember or have seen the slide that Marion put together a while ago that was representative of all the task groups that are working underneath the subcommittees right now. And one of the task groups that I'm leading is for the Measuring and Assessing Progress tool. And we're required by statute to stand up a tool that tracks progress related to the Climate Action Plan. So that's not just about emissions, it's about how we're doing with respect to equity, community engagement, resilience, and adaptation, and more. And so very comprehensive. And that's one of the RFPs that the framework for how we would build that tool was something that we worked on for the year putting together the Climate Action Plan. And there's a framework articulated for how we would build that tool from a collaborative process in the Climate Action Plan that was used to develop the RFP that is almost ready. So the irony there was that when we put that tool together, we thought that it made sense that for the consultant who was working with us to do the engagement, to do the model, the planning of how we were going to build that tool would be the one who would help us build it. But IT, in the end, wanted me to pull it apart and have them be separate. And so and one of those struggles with ADS. And so that RFP is finalized now, and it's with our leadership for review here. But that's one of the ones that we hope to post in the next week or two and move forward with this summer. And that task group hasn't met since the adoption of the plan, but when and if we sign the RFP and have proposals to review, that will certainly have folks from this committee. And Marion's already been really diving into looking at resilience metrics. She's been really learning in that space, going to webinars and different reading and thinking about how we're going to focus in on resilience metrics in that tool. And so it'll be exciting to engage with this subcommittee and be another component of work going forward in the coming year.
you, folks. Any other final discussion related to anything? Any questions? How about from our new folks? Alice has a question. I was just going to say, how about from our new folks? Are there any questions on process or anything related to that?
I guess this might be a self-answering question, or maybe just an obvious question, but as planning commissioner, I'm anticipating here now more work in our town plan to, I wouldn't say formalize, but to have a specific town plan goals and plans that direct what we do. Does that make sense? I mean, I'm not going to tell my planning commission now because kind of burnt out and I don't want to scare them. We're finishing up some town plan work now. Yeah, Jens is laughing because we've done Act 171 and Act 174 work and we're in land use now. But I'm anticipating that there will be additional work, maybe even to create a new climate action plan chapter in our town plan. Does that make sense?
I can take this one if you like, Alice. So we've been thinking about this question a lot as we're updating our regional plan for Franklin and Grand Isle counties and working with towns to update their energy plans. And there is no additional requirement for town plans to have a climate section. But what we are doing is recognizing as an issue and pulling climate into really pretty much every other section, whether it's dealing with climate adaptation, climate impacts, or greenhouse gas emissions. It seems to fit almost in every section. We're doing a special climate discussion. So that's the approach we're taking, in addition to making our energy plan a climate and energy plan. So
yeah, I agree with that because I'm already seeing some updates we would make our Act 174 energy goals that tie right into this. And I see some natural resources updates too. So thank you. That might scare them less.
Bronwyn?
I just wanted to add to that, the American Planning Association, I think, has been doing a pretty good job of really taking a lot of what's been the science and the policy, understanding climate impacts and understanding sort of the big picture strategy and really incorporating it into sort of the classic planning approaches, and letting planners know that to some extent, you have been doing climate action planning and policy, and really framing it not as this like whole new task that you have to take on, but a new lens in which you apply to all of the planning that you've already been doing. So there is going to be some change. There might be a little bit more work to do just in terms of understanding, but that it is something that you can incorporate into your existing planning frameworks, and so I think it's great that if you want to check out, APA has a sustainability division now, and it has some really great resources for climate action planning. That's really, the language is really tuned to planners and not people. Like my background was more on the policy side. And so the language is just really nicely attuned to people working at local planning.
Great.
Ben?
Yes, just to follow on that, I posted a link in the chat to a new report from the National League of Cities, and one of the maybe 6 featured jurisdictions is Vermont, with a lot of quotes from Kevin Geiger. And it's a really excellent, accessible report, in my opinion. And it forces confrontation of the degree to which it all boils down to housing and housing policy and housing placement. And I just think it's worth scrolling through that and thinking about whether requires some additional conversation by this group.
Huh. Now that really interests me, Ben.
I've also posted it in the chat, a quick resource guide that Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission put together, which is quite good about land use and climate change. So it's nice. It's very accessible.
Well, I can see, not to brag, but I think what we have in our current editing and new information in our town plan, I'm already seeing we're on that path and maybe a little ahead of the game here. So yeah, I think this goes in our pipeline. Thank you.
Well, great conversation, folks. Thanks so much. Want to make sure I don't cut off any last comments or thoughts that folks have before we go to public comment. Okay, I'll invite members of the public to use this time to provide their comments if they would like. I'm not hearing any. Right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. It's good to see everyone again. And we will be talking with you. We'll moving forward, we'll keep the same time on the monthly schedule, but if Catherine and I think that not enough to pull everybody together for a meeting, we can do an email update, but as you know, most of the work is going on at the task group level right now. So we want to bring this group together when we can inform that work for sure. Okay, have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Hopefully we'll enjoy some nicer weather in the latter part of the weekend, and thank you all for your work and service in support of this group. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.